some prisoners are just so terrifying that they need to be left in jail forever. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily, and today we are counting down our list of the top 10 terrifying prisoners we need to forget in solitary confinement. Number 10. Maxim Petrov. Maxim Petrov was convicted for the ending of 11 people's lives in St. Petersburg between 1999 and 2000. Maxim, nicknamed Dr. Death by the Russian media, was a practicing doctor who targeted patients from a local health center, ending their lives by giving them lethal injections at their homes, then robbing them. All victims were included on the same list of lung patients who had undergone fluorography. Using this list, the police identified 72 possible future victims in an operation called Medbrat, male nurse, involving 700 police officers. They arrested Maxim when he visited one of the patients on January 17th in the year 2000. On his arrest, Maxim admitted to the deaths but recanted his confession a few months later, blaming it on the intense psychological pressure he had endured while in custody. Various possessions stolen from the victims were later found in his flat, though he had already sold others at the market. He was suspected of ending the lives of 19 people, but tried for just 17. In 2002, Maxim was found guilty of 11 and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Number 9. Luka Magnotta. The name Luka Magnotta may sound familiar to some. Have you ever seen the Netflix documentary Don't F with Cats? Because if you have, this is where he's from. Luka took the life of Yun Lin, a university student in Montreal, Canada, in May 2012. After Luka ended his life, he then began to mail one's body parts to schools and federal political party offices. Then a video depicting the crime was posted online and Luka fled Canada, becoming the subject of an Interpol red notice and prompting an international manhunt. In June 2012, he was arrested in an internet cafe in Berlin, where he was caught Googling himself. He also was previously sought out by animal rights groups for uploading videos of himself ending the lives of kittens. In December 2014, after 8 days of deliberations, a jury convicted him of his crime and was given a mandatory life sentence and 19 years for other charges to be served concurrently. He is currently at Port Cartier prison in Quebec. Number 8. Rosemary West. Rosemary West collaborated with her husband Fred West in the torture and the ending of lives of at least 9 women between 1973 and 1987. Rosemary also ended the life of her stepdaughter Charmaine in 1971. After police found human remains and apparent signs of torture at 25 Cromwell Street, Rose, along with Fred, were arrested in February 1994. During her trial, Rose denied ending the lives of any of the victims. Rose told the jury that her husband committed the criminal acts alone, and she denied participating. In 1995, Rose was sentenced to life in prison while her husband ended his life before going to trial. She was found guilty of all 10 counts and was sentenced to life imprisonment, and it was emphasized that she should never be paroled. The Lord Chief Justice later decided that she should spend at least 25 years in prison, but in July 1997, Home Secretary Jack Straw subjected Rose to live out the rest of her life in jail. She's currently being held at HM Prison Newhall in West Yorkshire. Number 7. Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader, aka BTK, an abbreviation he gave himself for bind, torture, and kill, ended the lives of 10 people between the years of 1974 and 1991 in Wichita and Park City, Kansas. He didn't just end lives, but also stalked women, and 2 women he stalked in the 1980s and one whom he stopped in the mid-1990s filed restraining orders against him. He also sent taunting letters to police and media outlets describing the details of his crimes. By 2004, the investigation of BTK was considered a cold case. Then, after a decade-long hiatus, Dennis initiated a series of 11 communications to the local media. This activity led directly to his arrest in February 2005. He pled guilty and was sentenced in 2005 to 10 life sentences, and though he's eligible for parole, it won't be until he's served at least 175 years. He is currently at El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. Number 6. David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, aka Son of Sam, went on a spree of ending lives with his firearm many times in New York that started in July 1976. He ended the lives of 6 people and wounded 7 others by July 1977, terrorizing New Yorkers and gaining worldwide notoriety. David eluded the biggest police manhunt in the city's history while leaving letters that mocked the police and promised future crimes, which were highly publicized by the press. David was arrested on August 10, 1977 and subsequently indicted for 8 crimes that ended lives. He confessed to all of them and initially claimed to have been obeying orders of a demon manifested in the form of a dog belonging to his neighbor, Sam. After being found mentally competent to stand trial, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences in state prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. He then admitted that the dog and devil story was a hoax, which is shocking. Intense media coverage of the case made David a celebrity, and he seemed to enjoy it. In response, the New York State legislature enacted new statutes known popularly as Son of Sam laws, designed to keep criminals from financially profiting from the publicity created by their crimes. The statutes have remained in law in New York State despite various legal changes, and similar laws have been enacted in several other states. David is currently at Shagum Correctional Facility in New York. Number 5. Charles Cullen. Charles Cullen was a nurse who ended the lives of dozens of patients during a 16-year career spanning several New Jersey medical centers until being arrested in 2003. He confessed to committing as many as 40 deaths, at least 29 of which have been confirmed, though through interviews with the police, psychiatrists, and journalists suggest he committed many more, as some experts believe he has up to 400 victims. On March 10, 2006, Charles was brought into the courtroom of Lehigh County President Judge William H. Platt for a sentencing hearing. Charles, upset with the judge, kept repeating, "Your Honor, you need to step down," for 30 minutes until Judge Platt had Charles gagged with a cloth and duct tape. Even after being gagged, Charles continued to repeat the phrase. In the hearing, Judge Platt gave him an additional 6 life sentences. As part of his plea agreement, Charles has been working with law enforcement officials to identify additional victims. He was sentenced to 11 life sentences in 2006 and will not be eligible for parole until 2403. He is currently located at New Jersey State Prison in New Jersey. Number 4. Paul Bernardo. Paul Bernardo committed crimes together with his former wife Karla Homolka, who were nicknamed the Ken and Barbie Killers. He is known initially for taking advantage of people in Scarborough, Ontario, a suburb of Toronto, between 1987 and 1990, before ending the lives of 3 women with Karla. Among those victims was Karla's younger sister, Tammy Homolka. Karla took a plea bargain of 12 years imprisonment, and she began giving statements to investigators. She told police that Paul had boasted that he had taken advantage of as many as 30 women, twice as many as the police suspected. This plea bargain caused a lot of outrage and was seen as controversial. Karla was released from prison in 2005 and she settled in Quebec, where she married the brother of her lawyer, where she's rumored to still be today. But now, after Paul's capture and conviction, he was sentenced to life imprisonment and was later declared a dangerous offender, thus making it unlikely that he will ever be released from prison. Following his conviction, Paul confessed to taking advantage of 10 more victims, and he is currently being held at Millhaven Institution in Ontario, Canada. Number 3. Joseph James DeAngelo. Joseph James DeAngelo, aka the Golden State Killer, was a former police officer who ended the lives of 13 people, took advantage of 50 people, and had been involved in 120 burglaries in California between 1974 and 1986. He is responsible for at least 3 separate crime sprees throughout the state, each of which spawned a different nickname in the press before it became evident that they were committed by the same person. He was also linked to hundreds of incidents of thefts, burglaries, vandalism, peeping, stalking, and prowling. He wasn't arrested until 2018 though, when DNA tracing from family members on genealogy sites linked him to his crime. In June 2020, he pleaded guilty to 13 deaths and 13 counts of taking advantage of people. In August of that same year, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving time at Corcoran Prison in California. Number 2. Gary Ridgway. Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killer, was initially convicted of 48 separate deaths. As part of his plea bargain, another conviction was added, bringing the total number of convictions to 49. He ended the lives of women in the US state of Washington during the 1980s and 1990s. Now, most of Gary's victims were alleged to be sex workers, and other women in vulnerable circumstances, including runaways. The press gave him his nickname after the first 5 victims were found in the Green River before his identity was known. He strangled his victims, usually by hand, and after strangling them, he would dump their bodies in forested and overgrown areas in King County, often returning to the bodies to take advantage of them. On November 30th, 2001, Gary was arrested for the deaths of 4 women whose cases were linked to him through DNA profiling evidence. As part of a plea bargain wherein he agreed to disclose the location of still missing women, he was spared the death penalty. He was sentenced to 48 life sentences with no possibility of parole, an additional life sentence, and 480 more years of tampering with evidence. He is currently at Washington State Penitentiary in Washington State. And coming in at number 1 is Robert Pickton. Robert Pickton worked full-time at his family's pig farm after inheriting it in the early 1980s. It was at this point that it was believed he started ending people's lives. He ended their lives just like they were pigs. When he was done with their bodies, he would then feed them to his pigs to get rid of the evidence, which is just messed up. He was finally arrested in 2002 and was convicted in 2007 for the deaths of 6 women and also the subject of a lengthy investigation that yielded evidence of numerous other deaths. Robert was charged with the deaths of an additional 20 women, many of them from Vancouver's downtown east side, but the charges were stayed by the Crown in 2010. Robert was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years, the longest possible sentence for second-degree murder under Canadian law at the time he was sentenced. The conviction was appealed twice by his lawyers, but ultimately rejected by Canada's Supreme Court. During the trial's first day of jury evidence, the Crown stated that Robert had confessed to 49 deaths to an undercover agent from the Office of Inspector General who was posing as a cellmate. The Crown reported that he told the officer that he wanted to end the life of another woman to make it an even 50, and that he was caught because he was sloppy. There was actually a 2-part episode inspired by Robert on the popular crime drama Criminal Minds for the season 4 finale called To Hell and Back. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 terrifying prisoners we need to forget in solitary confinement. These people definitely need to stay there forever. They're terrifying. Which one do you think is the worst? Let us know in the comments down below. Again, I'm your host Emily, and I'll see you next time. Peace.